Alright, so today I'll be presenting my project for Interactive Objects and Environments 2, Project 1. So the focus of this project is to explore the Internet of Things and how a connection can be made between a physical object and the Internet, and can provide a meaningful interaction. So using a microcontroller, I have experimented sending data over the web and back, and using this connection I will delve deeper into the world of smart objects and try to create something that uses this connection in a way that's interesting. So for this project I used the Feather Huzzah, which is a microcontroller, and it's a very new piece of tech to me, so a lot of my experimentation began with connecting it properly and exploring what it had to offer. So to begin with hooking up the Feather, I used the basic code that was given in the first tutorial, and I hooked it up to my breadboard with an LED. As you can see, I have a switch instead of a button, so when I first hooked it up, I had an issue where I was trying to plug the wire into the wrong area of the switch. But then after that I was able to fix it, I realized my mistake, and then everything was running smoothly. Hooking it up to Arduino and changing my settings properly went smoothly, as well as making sure that my computer was able to run with the Feather. Then I moved on to sending data to Adafruit. So I set up an Adafruit account and I made a feed, and I used the Feather to web code to link it to my feed so that I would be able to display the data and send all of the values of my switch. From there I moved on to going live so that my Feather would be able to hook up to the web. So I did the opposite of what I did before with my feed and used the web to Feather code, allowing me to turn on an LED that's on my breadboard by clicking a button on a web page. And here you can see the function I used for send data to turn on and off the LED. So now I'm going to talk a bit about the meaning of connection. So for my interaction, I had to think carefully about how I could use the Feather in a meaningful way with 2 or more people. Since I had a switch and not a button, I was a little bit limited with the physical aspects that I was able to manipulate. You know, with a button I would have been able to tap it multiple times, but with a switch it was a fixed value. It was an on or it was an off. So I had to be very careful with how I approached it. In the end I decided to make some kind of a game or something to supplement a game, and I moved on to make a chess timer so that I would be able to reset the timer upon the flick of my switch, and my opponent would be able to reset the timer on their flick of a switch. So this is a system map that I used for my whole connection. So you can see I have 2 users, and they're connected with the Feather Huzzah that connects physically with this physical circuit, and the user interacts with the switch to create our reset timer. So the Feather Huzzah is uploaded with the Arduino code, which then hooks up to my Adafruit feed using Wi-Fi and my feed credentials, which then hooks up to my P5JS sketch, which I uploaded with CyberDuck to my Firebird server where it's hosted so that you can view my front-end interface. And by flicking the switch on my physical circuit, the users are able to interact with it on the front-end interface and reset the timer. So some examples that I was looking at were a typical chess timer that would be a physical object, as well as various timers that were digital. So before I started getting to work, I decided to do some research. So I looked on the P5JS website, and I looked at some similar projects, such as a game timer, so that I could have a reference or a starting point. And then I went and looked at some forums and saw what questions people were asking for similar projects, as well as how they approached them. And then I took all these code links and I put them into a document so that I would be able to reference them later. Then I moved on to being able to connect 2 feathers to the same feed. Since I wanted to have both people interacting with the same timer, I knew that I would have to have 2 feathers that were delivering data to the same place and then retrieve the data from that place. So I started by getting one of my friends in the class to hook up their feather to my feed, and then we experimented with getting both of them to manipulate the same thing. If I play this video, you can see that their feather, the light, is turning on and off, and off screen I am flicking my switch. So I found out that I was able to flick my switch and manipulate their breadboard, and they were able to do the same back to me. So we knew that everything was good to go, and we had them hooked up, and then we were ready to get up and running. So then I moved on to one of the examples from my code document that was from the P5JS website as a starting point, so that I'd be able to reference it and also figure out a way to create my timer. So if you see, the highlighted code is the line that I used for reference for making my chess timer. Then I moved on to beginning to develop the idea, so I used the basic web to feather code, and I added in my timer above the LED button, but it didn't account for getting the data from the feather, only receiving it, since it was the web to feather code, so I would have to edit it. So then moving on from the feather to web code, I had to create a get data function in order for my timer to reset upon the flick of my switch. So you can see in my function I have my timer set up, and I also have the get data function, so I'll be able to pull the data from my feed and have it manipulate when I flick the switch. This, however, caused an unexpected problem. So a problem that arose with my console was multiple errors. So my hypothesis for why this is happening is because I'm using a switch instead of a button. So I have a fixed value that is toggled. So if I'm giving it a 1 or a 0 value, I have to set my function to look for a 1 or 0 value. However, since I'm flicking the switch to a fixed position, whatever I put in my function, it will always have the opposite value of what it's looking for. So that proved a problem. So I figured out that I would have to have a button and that it was a problem with my physical circuit rather than my code. So I plan to get a button and hook it up to my breadboard so that I will be able to further manipulate my code and my timer and have it work properly. I hope that this will work and that by going forwards I will be able to further explore the meaning of this connection and develop it further so that I could maybe even move from a timer to a simple game now that I have a button that has more options for input.